Well, I want to give you a couple of examples to think about when you think about this theory. And as I said, Marx he knew the most about capitalism, being a European of the 1800s. And he didn't do a lot of work on cultures outside of Europe or on non-capitalist societies. But since his death, people have tried to apply his approach to religion in different places. And I just want to give you one example of how this might look if we were talking about a non-capitalist example. And so one example that you could look at to kind of support this idea of religion as an ideology is in an analysis of traditional Hawaiian religion. And before the American conquest of Hawaii, Hawaii was not a capitalist society. The best adjective that we have to describe the way society was organized was probably feudal. And by that I mean the society was divided into chiefs and commoners, a bit like the lords and peasants of medieval Europe, but with some important differences. One thing that commoners were obligated to do was to give tribute and support to the chiefs and their followers. So in this case, we're going to try to apply the Marxist theory of religion to the non-capitalist society of traditional Hawaii. Can we say that religion in Hawaii functioned as an ideology, reinforcing the power of the chiefs? Did Hawaiian religion make the inequalities in Hawaiian society seem right, good, or at least acceptable? Well, before the American conquest, each Hawaiian island was ruled by a paramount chief, a high chief, and he was assisted by lower-ranking chiefs who supervised the smaller territories within the chiefdom. The people of each territory were mostly small-scale farmers raising crops like taro, which is a root crop, and animals like pigs. Chiefs were hereditary rulers who had formal, socially accepted forms of power, and one form of power that they had was the right to demand tribute from commoners. So chiefs, assisted by their sub-chiefs, collected tribute, mostly food, from commoners in their territories. One report from the 1800s tells of a high chief collecting a total of 40,000 pigs from his subjects for a special celebration. Now typically, much of this tribute was actually redistributed back down throughout society, so that some of what was given by commoners was actually eventually received back by them. However, the chiefs also kept a portion of the tribute to support themselves, their families, followers, allies, armies, and so on. Well, why would people agree to send such a large quantity of food and other items in tribute to their chiefs? Why would they do that? And one answer is that the authority of the chief had both a material and a supernatural basis. Chiefs did control land and armies, and they could threaten physical force to ensure that commoners complied. But Hawaiians also believed that the highest-ranking chiefs were direct descendants of the Hawaiian gods, and that the chiefs maintained royal genealogies showing how they were related to the gods. The gods were thought to have granted their descendants, the chiefs, the right to collect tribute. From a Marxist perspective, this makes Hawaiian religion look a lot like an ideology. The belief that chiefs were divinely ordained rulers who have God-given right to collect tribute probably reinforced the loyalty and obedience of the commoners. To challenge the chief was to challenge the gods. That's a powerful disincentive to challenging the chiefs. So here in pre-conquest Hawaii is a society that does not have classes in the capitalist sense. But looking at this case as a Marxist one, we could say that the important thing about the religion is that it tends to serve as an ideology. It justifies inequality in Hawaiian society and reinforces the power of the chiefs over the commoners by linking the position of the chief with godly descendant, with godly genealogies, and by asserting the idea that chiefs collect tribute because the gods have empowered them to collect tribute. I want to remind you that Marxism is a materialist theory. Remember that he does not argue that religion causes the oppression of workers or commoners. He argued that the system of production is the root cause of oppression. However, he went on to say that religion often functions to make oppression seem more bearable. Remember that diagram of the base and the superstructure. What really matters in society, according to Marx, is economics and production. But ideas and values can also assist in reinforcing the power of the elites. Since he considered religion to be in the realm of beliefs and values, he argued that religion does not have any independent existence of its own. Instead, it's shaped and molded by production and class conflict and the interests of the capitalist class and other ruling classes to reinforce their power. I want to clear up one thing that often comes in at this point, and that's to say that he doesn't argue that the elites sit around in a smoky back room somewhere plotting to foist religion on the commoners or the workers. He doesn't necessarily believe that this was a conspiracy theory, to put it one way. He does think that the ideas of the ruling class are very influential, and that they find expression in art and in schools and in educational institutions, in churches, and that through the influence of the elites, religious beliefs come to be shaped and turn into an ideology. But he doesn't necessarily think that the elites are sitting in a back room saying, well, we're all atheists here, but let's make the poor workers believe in Christianity. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a lot more subtle in his account. But the question is, is religion always just an ideology? I mean, I gave you some examples that seem to lend support to this idea. But is it really accurate to say that religion is always just an ideology that serves the powerful? And I think we have to admit that this is probably a little too simple. Even if we take a brief look at Christianity, we see that things just aren't this straightforward. For example, if you take the case of liberation theology, this was a movement that started largely in Central and South America in the 1960s. In those countries, from the time of Spanish conquest, the Catholic Church had been aligned with the powerful people. And my battery's running low. That the Catholic Church had been aligned with powerful people, like the elite landowners who controlled the politics and economies of many Latin American countries. Many people in Latin America during that time and up to the present lived in severe poverty. But liberation theology was an effort by some Catholic thinkers to promote the side of Christianity that deals explicitly with the problems of the poor. There are, in fact, many passages in the Old and New Testament that reveal that the Christian God has a special concern for the problems of poor people. Liberation theology took that concern as a call to action. The Catholic priests and lay people who were involved with liberation theology said that it was perfectly consistent with Christianity to struggle against the powerful and to help the poor. And some of these religious leaders were harshly attacked by the right-wing dictators and landowners of their time. They felt very threatened by this new form of Christian theology. But the liberation theologists, they stuck it out and they said, look, we need to fight for the poor against the powerful. This is what we find in the history of the Christian religion and in the Christian Bible and in the words of Jesus Christ. And we're willing to fight and die for it. And in fact, many of these liberation theologists were in fact imprisoned, tortured, and assassinated for their views, which were harmful to the elite in the countries where they were active. So, one lesson from this is that Christianity is not just one monolithic thing that naturally supports elite interests. Christianity, like all religions, is open to multiple interpretations. Marxist theory can't account for why this religion, in the form of liberation theology, was actually on the side of the poor and against the interests of the elite. So, one way to put this is there's more to religion than just this simple idea that it serves as an ideology. Note that there's also a functionalist aspect to Marx's approach to religion. Essentially, he says, religion functions to reinforce elite rule. Well, this makes the theory subject to all the other criticisms of functionalism. Is it really true that religion functions to reinforce elite dominance? And does this account for the actual existence of religion or the persistence of religion? Remember the example of the pen or the pillow, where you can mistake something, the function of something, for its reason for existence. And we ought to ask this about Marxist theory as well. What are some basic points that we can keep from this approach to religion? I think it's reasonable to notice that sometimes in some places religion does function as an ideology. And I think it's reasonable to say that during Marx's lifetime, European Christianity probably did help capitalism to function by decreasing the amount of class conflict and by doing what he said it did, by setting people's sights on the afterlife as opposed to the problems of this life. I also think it's reasonable that economic forces might shape the particular form of a religion without determining everything about it. The reality is that a big religious tradition tends to be a bit like a salad bar. You know, a religious tradition is a complex thing, and they tend to include all kinds of different beliefs and interpretations. In some periods, some of those interpretations are emphasized, and at other times, people pick up and emphasize other things. You know, when you've got a couple of hundred or thousands of years of history to a religion, and you've got multiple sacred texts and different denominations and different locations and cultures where the religion is practiced, you're bound to get some variation within that mix. So it becomes very hard to say that the religion is all one thing and not actually many things at once. There's a pretty good case of this in the case of usury or usury in some pronunciations. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church ruled that usury, which the Church defined as lending money with interest, was a sin. But today, most Christians consider the borrowing and lending of money with interest to be quite acceptable. Well, why the change? You know, why is it that the dominant approach was to ban interest, and now today it seems like this utterly uncontroversial thing to do? Well, the Christian concern over usury tended to drop out of the picture as capitalism grew. Is this a coincidence? I doubt it. Lending and borrowing are important to capitalism because entrepreneurs often need to borrow money in order to have the capital they need to invest in economic activities. One could argue that the demands of the capitalist system resulted in pressure for usury to become more acceptable to Christians. In other words, in a world where banks can't lend money at interest, there aren't a lot of options for entrepreneurs to find the capital they need to invest and develop capitalist enterprises. So maybe Christianity evolved with capitalism and changed and became more friendly to capitalism over time. Religion certainly isn't just a product of economic conditions, but there's a lot of evidence that religion and economics certainly interact and influence each other, and we should be sensitive to those interactions and at least account for them in some way when we study religion. Well, I hope I've given you something to think about in terms of the Marxist theory, and we'll see you on the discussion board. Thank you.